Good morning, everyone. So incredibly grateful to be here. And as I often say, I'm grateful to be anywhere. Because I spent most of my life doing a lot of things and getting actually quite a bit done. And yet, I loved the reading today. I love the idea of don't just do something, sit there. And making a commitment to actually being present with what is. And we're going to be talking a lot about that today. So welcome to the year of infinite possibilities and the decade of infinite possibilities. But most importantly, welcome to the moment of infinite possibilities. We've created this idea that this is a new year, and we've collectively agreed upon it. It's pretty insignificant, really. It's not like it's the first day of spring. It's not in rhythm with the planet. So collectively, we have decided, and I don't know how many years ago, but a few, someone decided that January 1st was a new year. And we all collectively agree with that. And what do we do in the new year? We often set intentions, goals, resolutions. And so is it the 12th of January today? The 13th? 11th? 12th? See, we don't even know what day it is. Isn't that awesome? I have just heard 3 answers. That's perfect. It's a perfect opening. It's the 11th, 12th, or 13th. We know that. So what I want to ask is we're almost 2 weeks in. How are those New Year's resolutions going? How are those goals going? Right. So what we're going to be exploring today is how we actually consciously create our life. And I want to start by saying, I promised myself, I actually said, I will never, ... Has anyone ever said that? I will never. And then what usually happens when you say, I will never? We end up doing it, right? So I said years ago, when I first started doing this, if we call this work, which I do not, so I don't know what word to use. It's not exactly play either. I feel like I'm living on purpose, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. So I'll say it that way. When I first started living on purpose about 12 years ago, I promised myself I would never be the person that would create the 4 steps to this or that, or the 8-step process. So what we're exploring today, we already know where this is going, my 5 steps to conscious creation process, and I've given it an acronym, and it actually, when I first created this, I didn't realize it was almost an acronym already, with just one small tweak, and the acronym is MOVIE. So I'm going to give you the 5 steps right now, and we're going to be exploring that. The 5 steps to conscious creation. And Carl Jung says something so powerful, and I often use this quote because to me it's fundamental. It's life-changing, as a matter of fact. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life, and we will call it fate. Okay, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So we're always creating. We're powerful, creative beings. The issue is we're either unconsciously creating or consciously creating. And for some of us, we might vacillate between the two. So the 5-step process is an intention, it's a framework, because my mind likes a framework. Especially when I first came into New Thought in 1988, I liked that there was a framework. There were certain tools that I could use. There were affirmations I could use. There was affirmative prayer I could use. So this is one more tool maybe for your mind to have something to focus on while spirit, the essential truth of who we are, is actually creating. So MOVIE. Making peace with the past, overcoming core false beliefs, visioning, intention setting, and embodying the vision. And I want to read a quote from Byron Katie, who I think she's so beautiful in so many ways. I just love her and love the way she has so much clarity. So it's, I'll use her because she's so clear about this. Since the beginning of time, people have been trying to change the world so they can be happy. this hasn't ever worked. Because it approaches the problem backward. What we need is a way to change the projector mind rather than the projected. It's like when there's a piece of lint on a projector's lens. We think there's a flaw on the screen, and we try to change this person and that person, whomever the flaw appears on next. But it's futile to try to change the projected images. Once we realize where the lint is, we can clear the lens itself. This is the end of suffering and the beginning of a little joy in paradise. I can sit down now. So I love the way that particular quote speaks to the metaphor of creating a movie for our life. And when we talk about intention setting or goal setting, what I have noticed, certainly in my own journey and in spiritual communities and in the people I've worked with as a counselor, when it comes to goal setting and intention setting, most of us start with intention setting. We start making a list of what we want to create, and then maybe we have been to a spiritual community long enough, or a new thought community long enough to understand thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So we learn how to change our thinking and change our life. There's a little issue there, though. I actually don't think it's thought alone that creates. As a matter of fact, I don't think it's really thought that is the ultimate creator. I think it's frequency and the essential beingness of ourselves that is actually creative. The mind is trying to make sense of it all. So I start this 5-step process with making peace with the past for a very simple reason. If I have not made peace with the past, I'm carrying it with me. So any intention setting that I do is actually trying to make peace with the past. And a lot of times, there's an idea of right, wrong, good, bad about the past. And as long as I am deeply entrenched in the consciousness of right, wrong, good, bad, I'll say something maybe a little controversial. I don't think it's possible to forgive. And I don't think it's possible to make peace. Because if I believe very deeply that you have wronged me, how can I ever let that go? Or what I now say, live beyond. So making peace with the past has nothing to do with the past. As a matter of fact, the only past that exists is the past that exists in our consciousness or in our BS belief systems. Now, what I'm not saying, and please hear me, is we're going to pretend like that didn't happen. Or I'm not going to pretend like it didn't hurt. Or I'm not going to say the traumatic experiences of my early life don't matter at all. There's a paradox, though. The reality of the situation is the past isn't happening anymore, but I'm keeping it alive. And I'm keeping it alive about 100% of the time with a story about good, bad, right, wrong. And it usually goes something like this. She shouldn't have done that. My mom shouldn't have acted that way. Dad shouldn't have acted that way. My second grade teacher shouldn't have acted that way. My first grade teacher actually made me learn how to write my name that wasn't my name. There's a different name other than TJ on the birth certificate. She made me learn how to write that other name, which is, by the way, my dad's name. And even at that age, I was trying to reject being like my dad. I'm not like him, even that big. I carried that story of how could she until I was in my 30s. How dare she not see me? That's not who I am. My mom one day told me, oh yeah, I called your teacher and asked her to teach you how to spell that name. I had a story that was fundamental to who I believed I was, and a story of people don't see me for who I really am, and it never even happened the way I thought it happened. Right? I made her the bad person in that story. my evil first or second grade teacher. I don't remember. I think it was first grade. Do you see how I'm carrying this story that's creating my life? Because I can't possibly consciously create my life as long as I have these unconscious beliefs, which leads us into overcoming core false beliefs. Because of my experiences that I had as a very little person, I made some core decisions about myself that aren't even true, core false beliefs. I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. So I walked around that way for decades, believing that to be true. And that became the frequency, the vibration that I was bringing into every situation. Every situation was me vibrating it, I'm not good enough. And so like Byron Katie says, that was the lent on my projector. So if it's true that life is more neutral than we might realize, and I'm actually holding the projector and creating the movie of my life, and I have all these stories about good, bad, right, wrong, and if you knew what happened to me, you would know that I am like this because of that, right? Because that happened. And again, I'm going to reiterate, I'm not saying this pretend like it didn't happen. As a matter of fact, my spiritual work, if you will, was a lot of it was going back and feeling what I never let myself feel before. I remember being on the floor in the fetal position sobbing about some of that. But the interesting piece is it was in the feeling it that I was able to live beyond it. There was a conversation once at Agape Bay Area. I guess it was still Awakened to Living then. That was the community I started a decade ago. And the question came up, do we have to heal all our wounds? Do we have to heal all our wounds? And of course, I was, I think, probably one of the people answering that. And as you know by now, if you know me well, I usually don't answer a question. I usually ask 2 or 3 other questions to go with that question so that each of us can explore what seems true for us. So the question is, do I have to heal all my wounds? And the question I invited for us to take a look at is, what if, because that's my favorite, what if it wasn't about healing all the wounds, but about recognizing that that's not the essential truth of who and what I am? That on a personality level, I'm carrying these wounds or these stories or these core false beliefs about myself, and therefore that's the frequency I'm tuned into, and therefore that's what I'm experiencing in the world. That's the projector. Because when I came into New Thought, this is how I heard it. I'm going to use affirmative prayer and affirmations to change the world. Now, did anyone say that? I don't know, but that's what I heard. And there was a lot of what I call magical thinking, level of consciousness then. This was, back in the 80s, early 90s. That was even before we started calling it the law of attraction, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But I thought it was really about changing the conditions. And as Byron Katie said, we've been trying to do that for hundreds of years, probably thousands of years. And the question is, how's that going? I'm going to change you so I can be happy. I've spent a lot of time trying to do that. And what have I discovered? I suffer. And so what if, rather than having an idea that I have to heal all my wounds in order to be free, or I need the world to be any different in order for me to have peace, what if it was reversed and it was actually about me having the great remembering of who and what I really am? And when I know that I know that I know that God essence, spiritual, essential beingness, source energy, whatever word we use, because words are always trying to point to something that really can't be completely pointed to. Not really. There are some religious and spiritual traditions that call it the great mystery. The great mystery. But if it's true that we come into this world as a whole and perfect being, love, light, and joy, if that's true, and then we have life that happens to us, and we cover up that light or that love with all these stories of good, bad, right, wrong, and all these core beliefs about ourselves and the world, then the process of awakening is actually not a destination at all. It's a remembering. It's a remembering of who and what we are. Now for me, that remembering hasn't always been pleasant. I like to use the word pleasant and unpleasant rather than good and bad. It hasn't always been pleasant for me to first come to terms with the essential truth that I'm creating my life, but only 100% of the time. Right? Because 10 different people can have the exact same experience and have completely different conclusions or perspectives about that experience. And 100 people and 1,000 people. And what we end up trying to do is we try to build coalitions to support our point of view. Has anyone ever done that? I'm going to gather a little group of people over here. That happens in spiritual communities sometimes. Let's us get over here and talk about why they over there aren't doing it the way we think it should be. Anyone ever done that? Never at Brentwood. I'm going to get it right. You ready? Brentwood Inspired Living Center. I remembered it with ILC, I-L-C. So the journey, and the reason I start with those first two steps that I call the clearing steps is I can't consciously create my life as long as I'm still carrying the past with me. And what if it is true? What if it is true that the past doesn't exist, at least not the way that we've believed it? Have you ever heard the term, it's never too late to have a happy childhood? Now, what does that mean, right? That sounds great. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to go back and have a happy childhood. And I did have a happy childhood. I also had a really painful childhood. My childhood was filled with a multitude of different experiences. But somehow my mind likes to focus on the stuff that was really painful. I don't know if yours is like that, but mine did that. And it usually was, how dare they? My friend Michael Beckwith says, if we can just get people to forgive their parents. If we can just get there, that's the big one. And that's been true for me. My friend Gavin, 37 years old, said, I've been literally blaming my mother for my posture my entire life. And then I realized I could sit up straight. Now, that's a small example, but are we doing that in a larger way? I can't love myself because she didn't love me, not the way I needed it. Now, on one level, that might be true. But the issue with that is it's a story that is disempowering for my ability to either heal from that or live beyond it. We have some choice there. I can spend time healing that, and I can recognize that I can also live behind it, or beyond it, or above it, or beside it. But I don't have to be it. And the reason that I start with those two steps is ultimately conscious creation, or consciously creating our life, is about tapping into the inner wisdom. And I can't tap into the inner wisdom as long as I am focusing on the outer, sometimes wisdom. In unity teachings, we call it relative reality and ultimate reality. Relative reality is all that which changes, which is everything in the physical world. And guess what? Thoughts are matter. Thoughts are always changing. I can change my thinking, but it's always still going to be there. I thought the intention was to quiet the mind, or have it stop doing what it was doing, which was narrating. Anyone else have a narrator? Mine is pretty constant. And again, I thought it was, I need to quiet the mind. Once I can get the mind to be quiet, I'll be happy. And a wise person said, asking the mind to stop thinking is like asking the lungs to stop breathing, or the heart to stop pumping blood. It's not about quieting the mind. And it might not even be about changing our mind. It might be. Let me say it a little bit differently. It might be about changing our mind, and then there might be a deeper approach. And that is letting the mind do what it does, spending some time envisioning, which is the V in movie, very, very different than visualization. How many here have done a vision board? Oh, you just did them? Okay. Sorry that I'm going to say this, but I'm not really. It's okay. So vision boards aren't actually vision boards. They're visualization boards. And they're powerful because we know what we focus on grows, right? So it is a powerful tool. What we're talking about, though, in this conscious creation process is not visualization. Because visualization comes from my mind. And if it comes from my mind, it comes from the programming of my mind. And here's I'm going to say it really simply. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work trying to get my mind to have a new story. Trying to get my mind to let go of all the beliefs I had. But visioning is something really different. When I recognize I literally can make peace with the past regardless of what's happened. No matter what. It's a choice I have. Peace is a choice. As Eckhart Tolle says, if peace is really what we wanted, we would choose peace. So once we've made peace with the past, once we've overcome some of these core false beliefs, notice I don't say let go of core false beliefs, because MLUV wouldn't be a great acronym for one thing. That wouldn't make a great acronym. So overcoming these core false beliefs, we can find some time to spend in the silence. In the silence, we create a container, if you will, or a space to listen intently to what we once called the still small voice, which I am no longer calling the still small voice. What if it can be the predominant voice? What if it can actually be, I don't mean loud, but what if it can be ever present? And what if, rather than framing it as the still small voice that I need to listen to carefully, I recognize that at any moment I can tap into that deep well of information and knowledge. Because when we create from that place, there are a few things that happen. One, every time the vision's bigger than I would have created in my mind. Two, I have everything within me or outside of me to manifest the vision. I have the skills and the talents, and I also have the energy. Because for me, when I create from my mind, I find it depleting. Because I'm trying to make it happen. I'm going to do the vision board, sorry. I'm going to do the vision board. Oh, she did it a different way. How did you do it? I'm curious. Great. Okay, say a little more. I actually want to hear.
I call it creating in the parallel.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not actually doing a visualization.
Great.
It's sort of putting it in and going, what do I, what we're going into it.
So
feeling tone in the parallel.
So spending some time in the silence before we do the vision board. I love that. So you actually were doing vision boards, not visualization boards. Visioning, a vision board. Yeah, so spending time listening intently to the inner knowing and the inner voice takes us in a really different place than creating out of our mind. And so if you want a really great and simple visioning process, look at Michael Beckwith's book, Life Vision. It's very, very simple. You spend time in a silence and ask a series of questions. What's the highest possibility for my life? You could ask it as a community, what is the highest possibility? What do I need? How do I need to grow? What do I need to embrace in order to fulfill that vision? What do I need to release in order to fulfill that vision? What are my unique skills and talents already present that will allow me to fulfill the vision? And then listen really carefully for the internal yes. Because when I have the internal yes, suddenly it seems like life manifests all around me. So it's like it's frequency like a radio. I didn't create the song. The song was there somewhere. I tuned in and suddenly I could hear it and I could see it and I could feel it. So I think I've said this before, but we're shifting now from the law of attraction to the law of radiance. Being that frequency is the embodying the vision. And that's twofold. One, it's holding the vibration and the frequency of that which I want to step into or manifest. But more than that, it's really tuning into the ultimate frequency of who and what we are. And when I tune into that and I recognize the deeper truth of who and what I am, that can't help but create in the world. And suddenly the relationships show up to match the frequency. The situations in the world seem to line up. And in that way, it does feel like we're manifesting, right? It feels like, oh, I created that. I walked into that room and I looked at the 3 words on the wall. I said, oh, those are nice. Are those new? And they've been there for like a year, I think. A few years. Amy was very nice. Oh, yeah, a little while ago we put them up. And that's just a perfect example, right? Because when I walk in there, I'm like, I want coffee, I want food, I want to say hi to people. Right, so in that order, by the way. Sorry. I need the coffee and the food in order to connect, I guess. But my point to it is that words have been there all along. And what are the 3 words? Connect, grow, expand. And all of a sudden I look up and said, wow, are those new? 2 years? 3 years? A while. It may even be more than that. So that's the metaphor right there. It's been there all along. What if I'm not really creating anything, but I'm opening up to the infinite possibilities that already exist? What if as I expand my consciousness, suddenly I recognize there are loving people in my life. There are people that really want to be there for me. But if I'm holding the frequency of I don't deserve love, I'm going to repel like the magnets you turn around. So we want to turn those magnets to start to open up to a higher possibility for our lives. We're shifting from that idea that we're manifesting or attracting to we're beingness in the world. And for me, I like to say life is a great experiment. So what might happen if I would really know that I know that I know? Because I know for myself that I can't step into a life that I don't believe I deserve. Another way to say it is, I will only step into the life that I believe I deserve. So the process of awakening, actually unlearning and returning. Making peace with the past. Overcoming those core false beliefs that maybe we've been carrying for decades. I see a little gray hair in the room, so we might have carried it for decades. I did. I carried it for many decades. And then dedicating time in the silence to listen very closely and creating the intentions from that place of stillness, from that place of inner knowing. And as I said, when we get that vision, it's so much more powerful. It's bigger. It serves more people. It creates more love and connection in the world. It creates more fulfillment in my life. So in a way, the Byron Katie quote about trying to change the world in order to be happy, we can modify that now and say, I'm going to change my consciousness, shift my consciousness, become aware of something that's more infinite than my mind wants to believe, and then I'm happy. I think actually we choose to be happy first. And then we go about the intention setting. Then we can do those boards. Then we can, make a list of what we want to manifest. And for me, the most important piece in the end is that embodiment. Really understanding very deeply. And just recognizing, what if, this is what I'm going to say in closing, what if we just chose at this moment to love ourselves, no matter what? What if I could say, look at me being judgmental. I love my judgment. Some of you have little kids or have had little kids. If a 2-year-old, I like that age, or 3-year-old, is acting out, which would help them more, love or judgment? And what do kids often get? Right. Go to your room. Stop crying. Why are you doing that? Let me give you this so you stop crying. So, if I want to change my level of conscious awareness, If I want to shift from unconsciously creating my life to consciously creating my life, I feel like self-love and compassion is the activating technology that will help me. Because I spent years judging the judge. I mean me. Judging my own inner judge. So are you ready to consciously create your life? Are you willing in this moment to try this on and see what happens in this experiment called life? What if I were to view this differently? What if I were to remember who I really am? What if I didn't even need to fix that or change that? What if I could finally take that story and release it, overcome it? I did a workshop at a retreat, and we had a backpack full of heavy rocks. And people had to pick up the bag of rocks and come to the front of the room and tell one of the stories about their life. It was not about you have to let go of the bag of rocks, but how does it feel when you're holding that heavy story and telling us, the reason I'm this way is this. It was interesting. One person said, this isn't heavy. I could hold this forever. Right? One person just took it and went, boom, and it just hit the ground. And it kind of was startling for all of us. So sometimes it can happen suddenly. The only time is now. What if the awakening process wasn't actually a process? Decision that happened right in this moment. Because it can take a lifetime, or it can happen in an instant. We can say we're okay with the bag of rocks. We can drop the bag of rocks. We have a choice in how we create our life. And if no one's told you yet today, I want to tell you that you are a whole and perfect being just the way you are. Your past no longer defines you. And that you have a choice in this moment to move beyond unconscious creating and move into conscious creating. Know very deeply that love is who and what you are. And not only are you worthy of receiving that, but you're worthy of radiating that in the world. That's how consciousness shifts on the planet. We're not here to save the world. We're here to serve it. That's a quote from Michael Beckwith. I'm not going to claim that as my own. We're here to serve the new paradigm. The new paradigm is oneness. The new paradigm is love. The new paradigm is knowing deeply who and what we are. As always, it's such an honor being with you. I love you all.